I think most of us Japanese know this famous haiku of Shiki Masaoka. 書き食えば金がなるなり法隆寺. This is very simple, but it is difficult to translate, and the difficulty of translation is the very point I would like to explain in this article. At first, I'll show superficial translation. Someone who have no interest in haiku nor literature may be content with this translation and will say this haiku is nothing more or less than this translation. But in reality, this haiku is much more than this, and the poetic essence stands there. Now let's step into the same haiku is translated in this way. Or in this way. I know some authority of haiku would say they are inappropriate because Shiki wrote before making this haiku that when I was taking a rest at the tea room in front of the temple Horyuji, but as Japanese sentences are ambiguous about subject, I believe both later to conveys the essential meaning of this haiku. And this is the very point. There is no relationship between the two events that I eat the persimmon fruit and the bell of foliage lang. If someone believes this, if psychiatrists call it a delusion of reference. But poetic essence of haiku exists here. This is called toriawase or nibutsu shōgeki in terms of haiku. Toriawase means to pick up two things and connect them together, and nibutsu shōgeki means two things come across and clash. These two things, I believe, expressing almost same meaning, and these two different kind of events come together is also not everything, but a very important part of haiku. The haiku is very short style of poem, so it cannot be described details. To make good haiku is to give some good impression to others. One thing or one event are only itself, and to describe it using plain facts such as beautiful or wonderful is just yabo, which means not sophisticated, poor-minded, as extreme side to understanding haiku, and to make two things or two events come together is sometimes very excellent way to make haiku without being yabo. And the haiku kingo is centered. Kingo is translated as word of seasons, such as snow for winter, sakura, cherry blossom for spring. And in most cases, when we say two things or events come together, one of them is kingo. So what is the other one? I dare say it is a metaphor of the kingo. Two things, kingo and something to express the kingo, come together or come across and crushed makes one haiku. To explain this, let's back to the Shiki's haiku. The persimmon fruit is sweet and tastes good, but when someone expresses this as the persimmon fruit is sweet like honey, this is so predictable, so common, that it cannot be a poem. It cannot give a poetical impression to others. But when Shiki expresses the persimmon fruit as it is so sweet that it will make the bell of Horyuji rang, this expression is very unique and make people impressed. This is the point. Poetical delusion of reference is the essence of haiku, and just the delusion of reference in psychosis, especially in schizophrenia, can be haiku. To clarify this point, I'd like to show some haiku that patients of schizophrenia made. This patient has chronic schizophrenia, 65 years old, inpatient for 22 years in Tsuruka Hospital. She has severe grandiose delusion that she is wife of chief doctor of Tsuruka Hospital, not a patient. She is managing the hospital in her delusion, so she says many things related to delusions of reference. But when read their her hikes, she implies nothing delusional in them. The hike above is an example. It's just stating that the grenadine is sour. It's very simple. We may say that she is projecting her lonely feeling to the sour grenadine. It is a favorable interpretation, but we cannot say it's a good haiku. And this is an example of another patient. This haiku is written by a patient also of chronic schizophrenia. She has also a very peculiar and systemic delusion that she is under surveillance of many political organizations such as CIA and FBI. So she is tapped the phone and someone taking the picture of her all the time. She is living alone in her own house after her parents died. She is making ends meet with difficulty, and her house is in a great disorder. Sometimes she got so delusional and hospitalized. That means that she is apt to take things delusionally. Although she has so severe delusion of reference, also in this case the haiku of hers is very simple, and no delusional connection between green pine trees and to watch the dragon flies flying. As a hike, this is sketching the scene well. So I think this is better than former hike of Grenady, but so simple and as a poetical point, this is not so interesting. In paintings and novels such as Franz Kafka or Edvard Munch, patients of schizophrenia sometimes go beyond far above the reality and make very strange works. And these case the patients are delusional and has a rather strange way of thinking, but their haiku are not. I always wondered that if they could express her internal world in haiku, they would make many strange and so interesting haiku. The work of Kafka and Munch are masterpieces. Although there are many patients who make paintings and drawings, most of them are not in the least masterpieces. But still, we can say that they all have something strange in them. In the haiku patients, they are so ordinary and there is no flight of logic. We can say that these hikes are so normal that they are not interesting. And these cases are not exception. In many cases, very delusional and strange behavioral patients make very ordinary and not interesting haiku. How do we think this discrepancy in haiku? In this, some kind of specificity of haiku that distinguishes it from other types of arts. Sometimes in the field of literature analysis, many critics tell about specificity of haiku. It is so short a poem that many people recognize its special from other field of literature. But how do we think? It is very difficult. Japanese famous art critic Takeo Kuwabara says that the haiku is an art of the second kind. Although this is an extreme dispute, I'd like to analyze this point from psychiatric viewpoint. In this subject, there are very old and not yet clarified questions. A. Can we say that artistic works are made because of insanity? B. Artistic works are made against the artist's insanity, or there is no relationship between artistic ability and artist's mental state. Let's take an example from famous Spanish painter Goya. When he was young, he was a painter belonging exclusively to the Spanish court. He made very normal paintings of realism. But later in life, he got mad. Although the diagnosis is uncertain, it seems that he was having a delusional type of schizophrenia. After he got insane, he made very strange and grotesque paintings. And later in his history, only the late works, the strange and grotesque ones, remained as masterpieces. In Goya's case, we can say it's a kind of that artistic works are made because of insanity. the other hand, Salvador Dali, a famous painter who made very strange works, was also famous for his strange behaviors. But he studied psychiatry, especially psychoanalysis, and was a great sympathizer of Freud. And the strangeness of his works were well created from his knowledge of psychoanalysis. He might be a psychopathic man, but his works are product of normal mind. As I'm talking about haiku, let's move to the field of literature. Franz Kafka was suffered from schizophrenia, and his novel Metamorphosis is said to be describing the state of catatonic stupor. In the novel, the man became a big insect and he is tortured by his own existence. In this case, we can say that Kafka's insanity created this story. But his case is, I think, exceptional, and in reality, writers with schizophrenia are very rare. There are many psychopathic or personality disorder novelists, and sometimes they become drug or alcohol abuse, such as Angus Akangchu or William Burroughs. But their works are normal, and without pathological contents, they wrote novels even if they suffered from drug or alcohol. In these cases, B or C artistic works are made against the artist's insanity or no relationship is appropriate. In many fields of art, such as music, painting, literature, many works are related to insanity, and sometimes psychosis made masterpieces. But in haiku, even patients with severe psychosis make normal haiku. I think there will be some difference between them, and this difference has something to do with delusional phase of good haiku, Toriafse or Nibushongeki described above. At the same time, that may shed the light on haiku's possibility as an art therapy. I would like to tell about this. In the patients of schizophrenia, we can see many types of delusional difference, but in most cases, I think they are natural as completely unpredictable in the situation they are facing. For example, if two people near the patient talking and laughing with each other, and the patient can see them but not so near as to understand the contents of their speech, the patient has such delusion. They are talking about me, and as they are laughing, they must be making fun of me. The patient grasps the situation he or she is facing and possesses the delusion. In making haikus, the writer grasps the situation such as the scenery of Horyuji and the tea room serving the perfume fruits to the customer, and they are processed into one haiku. Haiku writers call this sketchy. In the patient, this process is primary process. In the term of psychoanalysis, impression is directly processed into the delusion. In good haiku, the impression of the situation is sketched and not directly processed, but deliberately selected the word so as to avoid the predictable expression. The haiku is a very short poem, so their poetic essence relies greatly upon this unpredictableness. Of course, in other genres of literature, unusual expressions or plots are important, but for example of novels, especially in long stories, they are processed on one after another. Although each process is understandable, entire story is delusional. I'd like to take example from famous Japanese rakugo when the wind blows barrel makers gain. This logic is when wind blows, it blows up the dust. The dust gets into the eyes of the people. That causes the people's eye disease, and some people would got blind. Blind people will become shamisen Japanese guitar players. Others shamisen is anti-red pill made of cat skin. Many cats will be caught. The loss of cats makes the number of rats more. Increased rats will bite the barrels, so the barrel makers will gain. Each part of the process is somehow understandable, but the entire process is ridiculous. I think this is a pattern of systematized delusion of schizophrenic patients. Their thought is little by little distorted, and the end entirely mad. The person with healthy mind may sometimes have distorted thought, but he or she can correct the entire process. For example, one may feel uneasy if the people near are talking and laughing, but what they are talking cannot be heard. In such circumstances, one can get into the conversation or distract oneself's attention so as not to one's delusional impression get stronger. This is the difference between patients and healthy mind. Everybody understands the logic that when the wind blows, it blows up the dust, and a healthy individual would not believe that amount to the barrel maker's gain. But schizophrenic process allows it. So what about haiku? I said that the hikes of patients are not too interesting because they are without the flight of ideas. Schizophrenic have it in the process of thought like between window blows and barrel maker's game. But haiku is a very short poem, so it is processed between window blow and blown up the dust. So to make a good haiku is supposed to process a kind of delusion of reference deliberately from the healthy mind. Sclerotic thought process of schizophrenia may cause systemic delusion, and at the same time it allows predictable haiku. Although schizophrenic patients make simple haiku, it is not intrusive because they do not become delusional in making it. And to teach them the heart of haiku is to make their sclerotic mind flexible, so there will be the way to use the haiku for therapy.